Welcome to Seekers and Shifters, where we talk to the world's foremost experts in personal growth and development and ask them everything we really want to know. Hey there, Seekers and Shifters. It's Michelle, and I am here with my new friend, Massimo Backus. Massimo, do you want to introduce yourself?
Michelle, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to share what I'm about and the work that I'm doing in the world. And fundamentally, I have an executive coaching firm, but the work that I really do is to help leaders have the epiphany of self-love and recognizing that core leadership starts from there.
I love that so much. And I want to ask about what brought you to that? What brought you to executive coaching in the first place?
You know, I think there are talking about seekers and shifters in your audience. Those that are seeking are looking for something that is honest and true for them. And I've found that comes in the form of things that we can't turn off. To use the double negative, things that we can't not do. And for me, that really comes down to leadership development and executive coaching. This is something that, whether they like it or not, I've been doing with, friends and family for years before I even knew that's what it was. But it's in my DNA. It's just the way that I'm wired. It's my passion. It's what I love. And as much as I am a practitioner of this, and I have been for almost 20 years, I'm also a student of it, because me and everyone else have one thing in common, which is that we're human. And the work that I do is about humans being leaders. But fundamentally, it's working on what it means to be human. It's far less about actually what it means to be a leader. We spend far too much time talking about how to be a better leader. And I think that we've got it backwards. Let's start with how do we be better humans, and leadership will follow.
I love that. Absolutely agree. I love we're the same age. So you remember, like, I'm not only the president of the Hair Club for Men, I'm also a client. Yes, everyone that is any kind of coach or practitioner in the personal development space. And I'll even stretch this to include therapists, clinicians, mental health professionals. It's all because we needed to figure out what the fuck was going on with ourselves first. And we started down this journey. And then again, you got to some place where you're like, you know what? I'm learning a lot. I've completely changed my entire experience, my entire reality. And so now I really want to help other people do this. By the way, love what you just said about my friends and family, whether they want me to or not, because I need to acknowledge something real quick, which is I'm sorry that I keep coaching people who don't want to be coached. I'm working on it. I'm working on waiting to be invited. Okay. My mom the other day was like, stop analyzing everything I do. I just want to talk to my dog. Can you tell me about that though for a second? Like, it happens to us, guys. Like, once we get down this path, we start seeing everything through this lens, and then it's really hard to you're just sort of have like a regular conversation with your bro or your mom or whoever, and you hear some shit, and you just like, can I tell you what I just heard? Like, how do you deal with that, Massimo?
It's funny because, I'm married to a coach, and my wife and we've been married for, it'll be 15 years next month, but she just got into coaching over the last few years. So it's relatively new, but yeah, now we've got to have, a conversation before the conversation around is what kind of conversation are we trying to have? And are we looking for coaching from each other or not? And when it comes to friends and family, I just have to tell people, I sometimes can't turn it off. So please let me know if I've stepped into this territory and that's, not where you want to go. Like, my feelings aren't going to be hurt if you tell me that I've gone too far. My feelings will be hurt if you don't feel enough, trust in our relationship to not tell me that I've gone too far or pushed a bit too much.
Right. And then there's just that, like, for me, I'm reminding myself, look, if somebody wants my help, they'll ask for it. Maybe I can just project enough of an aura of I can help you. And the right people will come, and the right people do come and ask for the help. And somebody else, like, maybe not my place to say in that moment when they're not asking, right?
Well, a big shift for me, Michelle, was you develop these skills. We obviously have a passion for this work, and that's where that desire to help comes from. But when I realized that my desire to help was being driven by my need to feel helpful, as opposed to actually being helpful and the person being ready to be receiving of that, I was able to slow down a bit and have a much greater degree of self-awareness of, is this appropriate? Is this really in service of somebody else? Or are my human needs getting in the way of what I think I'm doing, which is, being a great coach or being a great support for someone else? And in slowing down and doing it less, people now come to me so much more. Even in like a group of friends or something, people will know this is the person in this group that I want to go to. And when they come to you, they know the invitation's there, but they don't have to accept that invitation. That's okay. But when they do accept the invitation, you're able to actually step in and have the best possible outcome for those conversations than when we're caught up in being helpful. And I don't know, does that resonate with you? Do you find that sometimes it's more about your need to be helpful than really help, if you're being honest with yourself?
100%, especially when I first started. So this is really about my 8th year of coaching now. And I started just as a straight business coach. So I train entrepreneurs, and then I got deeper and deeper into the mindset part, because it's okay, well, we can't do a lot with business strategy when we're afraid to do it, et cetera. Right. And at first, especially with business outcomes, one of my superpowers is I can see a possibility for what somebody could do with a business, but I had to learn very quickly that it's not about what I want for somebody else or what they could do. It's about what they want for themselves. I mean, without that fundamental lesson early on, I would not be happy as a coach. I mean, it's miserable to be like, but I want you to do this. Right? Why are you doing this thing that I want for you? We have to, part of the great part about coaching, I'll frame it that way, is that we get the opportunity to look deeply at ourselves and all the ways that we're fucked up and all the ways that that's showing up in our work, like you're pointing. And it's sometimes it can be uncomfortable shining a light on yourself and going, oh, wow, that's actually what I'm doing. That's what I'm projecting onto somebody else. I'm making it about me when it's about them. But if you don't learn that as a coach within your first, 6 months or a year, you're not going to last very long. You're not going to be very happy, and you're not going to have a lot of repeat business or referrals. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. I'm always have to be very cautious not to be judgmental. It's, it's something that I used to do with reckless abandon. I was, very comfortable in being judgmental, and it's something that I try very purposely not to do. But I find that when people get bitten by the bug or want to get into coaching or start a coaching business, my first question to them, if they are asking me for advice or guidance or, my experience, is what is their why behind it? And again, not from a place of judgment, but to be really curious. And if I hear that their why is in some way self-serving, or because they had that moment where coaching felt good and they want to, continue to stay in that space where it feels good, that I would caution them from really pursuing this type of work. Not that they shouldn't or that they couldn't coach, friends or family, but if there is a self-serving nature to it, it will manifest itself. It will show up in the work and in the way that you approach it. And then there's the people that get into coaching because, like you and I, we can't turn it off, which means now we're forced to do the hard work and look at ourselves and figure out what's really my why that's going to be sustainable to do this work. It can't be self-serving because it's service-oriented work. So I was one of those people that first got into coaching because it felt good. But because I couldn't not do it, I was forced to on a daily basis, I'm continued to, forced to have those hard looks in the mirror and be like, what is this really all about? And is this about you? Because if it is, you need to step to the sidelines.
Absolutely. And I think it's okay to find personal fulfillment in the work, of course. If you're, hey, this is what I'm called to do and this fulfills my heart. Sure, absolutely. And once it starts to be an ego feeding thing, it's not going to work for very long. And every coach, you and I and all the other coaches, we have this experience of something we did with a client. They get some amazing transformational result in their life. Their whole reality shifts, all their outcome shifts. And then they come back and they go, look at all these things I did. And, until you can get to a point of like, yes, you did. You're amazing. Because when you're at that point of, but that's only because I guided you through this or that, or we applied my friend. Like if you're in that point, you're not going to be very happy very long. Like, very few clients are ever going to say it's all because of you and what you did. They'll even say things like, I don't know why this happened, but suddenly my life, and you're just like rolling your eyes in the background. Right? Like, I don't know. I don't know why your life suddenly shifted. Amazing magic, right? But it's got to get to this point where to me, it's very similar to parenting, right? Like it takes a long time for kids to turn around and say, thanks, mom, thanks, dad, for everything you did for the fulfillment is in watching the outcome, right?
Wait, let me ask you this. What's the biggest challenge that your audience is dealing with?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out now because I feel like that's shifted since COVID, right? Like I had a very successfully, rapidly growing business coaching practice, like rapidly, like we were going to be on the Inc. 5000 kind of thing, pre-COVID. Right. And then like so many other business owners, like COVID just handed me my ass, right? Like I just like, great, humbling experience. And I've been in business. I've continued my practice ever since. And it's like, but I realize that the way people work now is different than the way we worked before. I feel like, and I wonder if you feel this too, but I feel like, sometimes we've got to go a little slower. Maybe we can only do a little bit less at a time than we used to. It's like everybody's collectively burnt out. I don't want to put that on everybody. But it just feels like we've got to be a little slower. We got to be a little softer, maybe a little less ambitious. And I don't hear from entrepreneurs as often that like, I'm so excited to get into business and do this huge thing and to scale this thing up. It's like, we all got a little bit shell shocked and everybody's a little bit like, I don't know what I want to do. And then, interest rates are higher. That doesn't help either. I don't know. Let me turn that back to you. Like, how do you feel like things have shifted in the past few years in your practice?
I started my practice in August of 2020.
Okay. So you were post COVID.
Well, I mean, I guess that was kind of like the year one of COVID.
Yeah. Beginning.
Everything was up in the air and changing and scary and uncertain and all of that. And I think that accepting uncertainty as an entrepreneur is kind of a prerequisite, to be able to accept the things that are out of our control and focus on the things that are in our control. And that has been something that the corporate executive clients that I work with is a foundation of the work that we do together. Many of the people that I work with are top performers, high achievers, perfectionistic, controlling, have felt like they are in control of more than they really are. And then when you are struck with something like COVID or any other kind of big shifts in the market or the economy, you start to realize, well, these things that I thought that I was in control of, I'm not in control of. And yes, that can be really humbling, but it also allows you to review what are all the things that are in my control. And I find a very helpful place to start from is through a practice of gratitude and appreciation. One, gratitude, appreciation are things that are in control, but you can also identify through that practice what are other things that are in your control. Our mindset, our response to our feelings, our actions, our behaviors, our thoughts, our assumptions are all things that create our experience of the outer world. And all of those things are in our control. What someone else does or doesn't do or how they respond, now that is not. But if I can acknowledge all the things that are in my control and try and be the master of that domain, meaning the domain of self, then the acceptance of uncertainty becomes much less daunting because I know that I can pivot. And the foundation of all of my work is this leadership epiphany that self-love is the foundation of that. And I don't mean that in a Pollyanna way. And I don't mean that in a way that is self-aggrandizing or thinking that you're better than other people. I mean the kind of love that we offer to those that are closest to us, to those that are parents, the kind of love that you have for a child, that you believe that they are enough. You believe that you love them so much when they win the ball game or do something fantastic, and you love them when they make mistakes, and that you're there to support them either way. When we can learn to do that for ourselves, it makes the challenges in life, in work, much more manageable. Not easy and certainly not comfortable. But I also think that things like discomfort or feedback is uncomfortable, that we're trying to avoid being uncomfortable. I think that is I think that's a big error in our thinking at large. I think we need to be able to be uncomfortable and be kind to ourselves in the face of that. Because anytime anybody who's entrepreneur or anything is trying to do something that is bigger than themselves, it's uncomfortable. Anytime you're putting yourself out there, you're putting yourself at risk at the judgment or opinions of others. That's uncomfortable. So to be too positive with our mindset and think that we're better than that or we won't be impacted is a lie. But to be compassionate towards ourselves and say, like, this is going to be uncomfortable. What I'm doing is going to be uncomfortable, and I can support myself through that. That's a game changer. And in September, I'm publishing my first book. It's extremely fucking uncomfortable to put something out there that has my name on the cover that isn't just a post that will be, forgotten in a day or two, but is a material, object that someone could have sitting on their desk or on their bookshelf. What if they don't like it? What if it's not any good? I am fully exposing myself to all of the judgment that comes from that. And back to what we were talking about earlier, Michelle, about that why. Through the process of writing the book, I had to really challenge my why. Is this because I want to be a thought leader? Is it because I want to be important? Is it because I want to say that I'm an author? And I had to do an ego check along the way to make sure that that was not the reason. Maybe at times it could have been the reason, or there's some ego-driven thing. But for me, I realized I cannot finish and produce this book unless the reason is something that is bigger than myself. And in a sense, that is a protective mechanism, because I'm now not attributing my self-worth to the book. It is just a message that I'm trying to get out into the world. And I believe that it's a valuable message, but whether or not it is a bestseller or it's the worst book ever written, that will not impact my view of myself one way or the other, meaning I'm not going to be the greatest and I'm not going to be the worst no matter what happens. And that, in my opinion, is liberation.
100%. 100%. I just read a book, by the way, and I'm sure you know it. It's called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. Yes. Yeah. Favorite of yours. And I've been practicing, which is, I love myself every breath in. And then I've started saying, I love everybody else on the exhale. I added that part. I love everybody else on the exhale. I'm finding this to be such a helpful practice. Even though I would have told you, prior to reading this book, if you'd said, Michelle, do you love yourself? I would have said, yeah, I love myself. It's nice to practice it actively. I'm doing it in the gym now with every rep. I love myself, right? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I lifting weights? And I love myself. Walking around, I love myself. And just a few times a day. And it's amazing how just reminding yourself that you've got your own back can calm you so intensely. And of course, if you're frustrated with other people, I love myself. I love everybody else. It's a helpful exercise as well. You're familiar with the book, it sounds like.
I'm very familiar with the book and, agree wholeheartedly with the message. And I think what's interesting is that the author's journey of their own epiphany of self-love that was the impetus for writing the book, and the journey afterwards, that they stumbled along the way. That it wasn't this moment of, I learned to love myself and therefore the rest of my life was great. But there were times where it came easy and there were times that it came more difficult. And there were times that it became so easy that the practice went away. That it was no longer a daily intention to practice this mantra, in their case, of self-love, but it happened less and less and less. And sure enough, these other parts that we are conditioned to not love ourselves. We are not conditioned to love ourselves, which means that it has to be intentional, right? And that is a commitment that if we make it, we have to make it again every single day for the rest of our life. It's that type of commitment. And there are days that I forget to make that commitment and I slip up. There are weeks where I forget to make the commitment. But because I've had the leadership epiphany in the first place, I always have that as the bedrock to go back to. So whenever I lose my way, I always have that place to come back to of that's right. There is nothing truly in this world that is more important than my ability to love myself. Because from that place, I will be my most conscious and best self in service of those that I love, the people that I support, my community, my commitment to doing good in the world. That is a daunting endeavor to recognize you commit to something every single day. But even acknowledging when we slip up to come back to it is an act of self-love, as opposed to berating ourselves or feeling shame that I haven't done these things. And you mentioned that you've done a lot of mindset coaching, Michelle, and I am a big believer in mindset. But I'm also a bit of a cynic of it, because I believe that anything that originated for the use of good, you could give me any leadership development concept that exists, I will show you a context in which it's been weaponized. And mindset is something that has been weaponized into this notion of hustle culture, work more, get more, work hard, play hard, all of this that, again, if that really is true for you, that's great, but only you will know if you ask yourself, what is the why behind it? And I find that most entrepreneurs that are driven by that hustle, I gotta get more, I gotta be the best, that it actually is driven from some place of, I'm not enough unless this happens.
Oh, 100%, 100%. A lot of the work I do is around entrepreneurial trauma and trauma release, so that we don't build businesses on our baggage and create, what happens is people will create a prison of their own making, because you can be successful from a bad place. You can be successful from a place of spite, or from a move away from motivation, or I'm going to prove this to somebody, or I'm going to prove it to myself, or I'm going to prove it to my dad, or whatever. Right. But you're not going to be happy once you build that thing. And it doesn't matter how many millions of dollars or, what kind of status you have. If it didn't come from an original place of alignment, it's not going to be something that you feel happy and joyous in. And it's not the biggest selling point when I say, oh, I want to help entrepreneurs feel happy and feel joyous. But that is my why. And my motivation is let's do this in a healthy way, because when we create from alignment, what happens is so beautiful. What happens becomes a manifestation, a physical manifestation of somebody's purpose, of somebody's dreams, right? Sometimes here, I'll tell you a personal thing. I will walk into just a coffee shop or a boutique sometimes, and I'll get teary because I'll think about, this was somebody's dream. And they sat down with their friends and family and said, one day I'm going to have this coffee shop, or one day I'm going to have this bar, or I'm going to have this little boutique. And I know, man, they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into figuring out how to get the money, putting the furniture together themselves, picking every decoration on the wall. And it's like you're standing in somebody's dream. It's beautiful. You walk down the street and everything, and this is big businesses too. They started out as somebody's dream. Maybe it was a long time ago. Maybe it's gotten away from that, but it started as somebody's idea, somebody's dream. That's amazing to me. The fact that we can physically manifest our dreams and our inspirations, right? But it's got to come from a place of alignment or positivity, or it's not healthy. Because then what we're doing is we're taking our trauma and we're just projecting it out into something bigger. And then we're starting to employ people in it. And now we're actually doing something that hurts other people.
Yes. Yeah. I'm curious how you think about alignment. One of the first questions I ask my clients is, what's their personal definition of success? And that is very telling to me about what's their orientation of the world. Is it outward success? Is it internal success? And I think that the ideal, the goal is both, an alignment of both. Because we live in a society where we aspire to and admire those that have all of the outward success. But as adults, we also know that no one is as what they seem. No family that looks perfect is as perfect as what they seem. And there's always a lot more to the story than we realize. And so you can have all of the external success in the world and just want more, and it'll never be enough. And we can think of people that are monk life and seem to not have the external success, but seem very at peace internally. And I think that in a capitalist society like ours, we need to be able to balance of both. We need to pay our bills and provide for our children and be contributors in society, but also know what is the word Hugo, what is enough in all of this. And there was a time in my life where I was just focused on external success and it was never enough. I'm very content with the success in my life. Sure, more would be great, but to be in a place of accepting what I have and seeing how good that is liberating, as I said before. But also the internal success allows me to appreciate a sunrise in a different way. It allows me to be more mindful about when I'm exercising or what it is that I eat or how wonderful it is to be in a meaningful conversation with you right now and be fully present in this and not preoccupied by something else.
Right.
And that you can't put a price on.
Absolutely. It's maybe cliche to talk about inner peace, but it is inner peace. It is when I talk about alignment, it is about, and Abraham Hicks would call this, being in the right vibration or in a high vibration. I love Abraham Hicks. I'm a nerd about it, right? But being in the vibration where things feel good to you and where you are in harmony internally, where your parts are in agreement. They're not fighting with each other within your head. Going, part of me wants to do this and part of me, no, we all want to do this. We're all swimming in the same direction. I will describe it sometimes to clients as it feels like you're swimming downstream with the current. You're flowing with the current instead of swimming upstream against it. And to notice that, when am I in flow versus when am I working up against something because it's coming from, I'm trying to fill a hole in my soul. And I think that if I do this or get this or achieve this, that then I'll be okay versus, no, I'm okay right now. I'm okay right now. And the work is just to start to realize that it's really, it's not about getting more. It's about taking things off of me. It's about shedding this conditioning. It's about shedding this pretense. It's about shedding these expectations from other people and from myself and realizing that I'm already perfect and beautiful and amazing and happy and peaceful here in the core underneath before all this shit got layered on. Right?
Yes. And it all gets layered on. And then, the work is, it's about removing all of that and trying to get back to like the source, like what's real, what really matters, what's really important. When you're working with your clients and you're thinking about this from the perspective for entrepreneurs, what do you see as the best way to start to strip away the baggage that people could build their businesses on?
Curiosity, right? As a coach, my curiosity, and even as a salesperson. And so when I teach sales internally, externally, we talk about, just be like, literally ask what you actually want to know as a coach. Ask what you're actually curious about instead of what question should I ask? What should I think about? What are you curious about? And modeling curiosity for a client to start to become curious about themselves and to start to observe. And so can we move from a space of judgment and shoulds and I don't like myself when I'm like that, or I don't want to be like, to, I wonder why I do that. I wonder why, even though I there's a part of me that doesn't like this behavior or this outcome or this loop, I wonder why I continue to repeat it or to reenact it. Let me explore that, right? Once we get into personal development nerds like you and me, we start to celebrate when our baggage comes up and go, yay, like, ooh, a red flag came up. Sweet. I get a thread to pull and I get to learn a little more about myself today. And so my first step is like, are we interested in learning a little more about ourselves? Are we ready to let things go? It's okay if you're not. It's okay if you don't feel safe to yet. It's not always the right time for everybody. We're on a different path, different timing. Right? But are you at the place where something is telling you, and probably if you came to talk to me or came to talk to you, you are. Something, at least part of you is ready to move or ready to shift. So cool. Where does that come from? What's happening? And let's start to explore. Sometimes we can entangle it very quickly. Sometimes it might take a while before you're feeling safe enough to really untangle it, but it's the willingness to show up, right? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that it is all about curiosity. And being curious is really uncomfortable. Being curious about someone else is really uncomfortable because you don't know what the answer is going to be. If you're truly curious, and that's what makes coaching difficult, is that you don't know what is going to come next. So you can't get it right or wrong. And people don't like working in a space of where I can't get it right or wrong, because we've all been acculturated in a society that stack ranks us and tells us what good and bad looks like. So everything has a score. And in coaching, we don't really know what the score is going to be. We might not know. We don't know when it's going to happen. So that in itself is uncomfortable. And in the process of being curious for ourselves, we're going to find things that we don't necessarily like, or that don't feel good, or that they may have shame attached to them. And I say this with pride isn't the right word, but a great degree of acceptance that I am an incredibly flawed human being. I accept that about myself. That doesn't mean that I like all of those qualities. Doesn't mean that I don't want those things to change. So acceptance is not apathy. But acceptance is what allows me to go beyond just the first step of self-awareness. I think we're in a time right now where self-awareness as a concept is in the zeitgeist. Everybody wants to make sure that they're self-aware. And I think there's a bit of bullshit in that, because I have seen people that are self-aware and they just say, well, so I know this about myself. Yeah, I can be a jerk at times, so you should accept it too. I've accepted it. Or, I know I can have a short fuse. I get angry really quickly, but I accept that. I'm self-aware that I do that. That means nothing, just to recognize that about yourself. Real self-awareness is understanding why you are like that. How does it benefit you? It protects people. All of our worst qualities are all there to protect us in some way. They are all there as a forcing function to protect us. And I think about them as well-intentioned, misinformed protectors. All of these coping mechanisms are well-intentioned. They're there to protect us, but they were formed when we were young, before we were adolescents, before we were informed, and our brains were even fully formed. And so they are misinformed. They are trying to protect someone that we are not the same person as we were before. And I'll give you a specific example, a personal example, Michelle. I used to be, and still at times can be, but used to be severely defensive in all aspects of life, both professionally and personally, defensive-ness. And that was my coping mechanism. I would defend by making sure that I sounded like the smartest person in the room. I would defend by using logic and overpowering, an argument. Or I would just defend because I didn't want to be wrong. Entirely foolish, not really effective, but it was a coping mechanism that was developed for me at a young age. And it was well-intentioned because all of that was just trying to protect me. And maybe at one time it did, kept the attention off of me. But once I realized that it was no longer serving me, but it was coming from a good place, I didn't have to hate that part of myself. I could actually respond in those moments when it happened to go like, yeah, you're trying to protect yourself right now, but you don't need protecting. This isn't really a threat. You don't need to be defensive. And from there, I could be more curious and be like, well, what is the threat? Why do I feel threatened here? What's really going on? What assumptions I'm making? What's the story I'm telling myself? And from there, you actually take personal accountability. But self-awareness without personal accountability, without the follow through, going back to that daily commitment to love ourselves, it's just hot air. It's just a bunch of bullshit. And if people around us haven't caught on to it yet, they inevitably will. It's just a matter of time.
That question of what's the story that I'm telling myself is such a powerful question for folks that are just kind of starting out on this journey. The biggest shift that I see in the beginning with anybody I work with is this shift from the thought that their reality is the reality to the realization that their perception is just one interpretation of events, and that we all have different perceptions, and that there's no such thing as one universal objective truth. Right. And that it's really just like as many different people as our billions of different people have billions of different interpretations, and that we're all seeing and experiencing things a little differently. And once you figure that out, man, that changes your reality like that. And it's like, now we've got something we can work with.
Yeah. And the story that we tell ourselves is oftentimes a very well told story in a very familiar voice, meaning our voice. And it's something that has been on repeat for so often that it must be true because I've heard it over and over again. And that could show up in, as long as things are perfect, then I'll be safe. So I need to make sure that everything is perfect. I can't have any clutter on my counter, and I There can't be any, leaves in the yard. And as long as, that's perfect, then everything in my life is going to be perfect. And that's the story. So we're holding on for dear life to control that. And when you start to strip away the, where that story came from and think about well, what else is true? Then you can start to accept that there might be other things that are true and freeing. And what I find is that the stories that we tell ourselves lead to rumination. So for anybody who's listening who is stuck in rumination, that is a story that you're telling yourself that's on repeat. And rumination is exhausting because it's like being in an argument all the time with yourself. And arguments.
Or with another person who can't hear you yelling at them. Your head.
Yes, exactly. Yes. A one-way argument where the other person's not actually responding. Yeah.
Right. And it's a time to say, why? Why is this loop looping? Right. Because the only way to break the loop is with your own curiosity.
What was the aha moment for you? Like when you think about the story you were telling yourself, was there an aha moment that shifted things for you?
It's because I've been such a nerd about this stuff for a long time. And I'm trying to think where was it that there was just like well, you know what really changed my life? And this is going to be a controversial statement, but I was 24 years old and I was pregnant and I ended up at Landmark. Landmark is controversial. There are people who think Landmark is a cult. Landmark is certainly very aggressive in their marketing. I may have had to change my phone number at the time. And at that point in my personal development, 24, about to become a mother, and my brain isn't even formed yet, right? They solidifies at 25, right? That was a pivotal moment for me starting to see things differently and starting to realize that, my sense of self-consciousness was something that everybody else shares, that everybody else is worried about themselves as much as I'm worried about me, that I could clear my relationships with other people. I didn't have to hold on to stuff. I could pick up the phone at any point. I'm dating myself, but back when you picked up the phone and it was like this, not like this, right? You pick up the phone at any point and say, hey, I want to have a clearing conversation and I just want to and it's okay if we want to part ways after that. But I don't need to hold on to these loose threads all the time. I can start to complete with myself. That set me down a whole personal growth and development journey of now 20 years to where I'm getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm enough of a beginner after 20 years that I can start to share some of my questions with other people, right?
Yeah. And when you realized that you could let that go, but that took action for you to have those conversations, what was it that gave you the courage and the motivation to have those? Because those types of conversations can be quite difficult.
My control baggage, right? And so you talk about different stories that people tell themselves, and one dichotomy we see a lot is there's either people who are like me, and a lot of us end up being entrepreneurs who want to control everything. We're control freaks. Everything's fine as long as I'm in charge and I'm in control and I'm hyper independent and all. And then you've got the people who are the other way. Everything's okay as long as somebody else is taking care of me and someone else is telling me what to do and something, both of these are, need to come to balance, right? We have to work. But me being the former type of person, it was easy for me to then spring into action. Action feels good to me. What I have had to work harder on is learning to be and learning to receive. So it was not hard for me to kick into action and sort of the toxic mindset, entrepreneurial mindset you talk about a lot will prey on this do it harder mentality of just do more, do it harder, get up at 5 a.m, take a shower, cold one, comfortable being uncomfortable, go, and there's positive aspects to a lot of that and it goes too far, right? All of this is about coming into balance. What was your turning point? Last question. What was your turning point?
I had my own epiphany about self-love, and I was at a retreat. It was the Hoffman Process is the name of that program. And it's interesting that for you was at Landmark, I think that taking ourselves out of our day-to-day, being in a different element and succumbing, surrendering to a process can create the vulnerability that is required to be able to find that aha, that epiphany moment. But for me, it was on day 4 of this retreat, and I was walking through the woods by myself in Napa, California, and I remember I could hear the rustling of the leaves as the breeze was going through the trees, and I felt the sun hit my skin. And it was as if all of my senses were heightened in a way. And I realized that the voice that was in my head that was telling stories on repeat had gone away, that it was quiet. And there was a serenity that came with that. It was the first time in my life, I was 36 years old. It was the first time in my life that I can recall not having the chatter in my head. And in that moment, I started laughing hysterically, this like pure joy. And it was the first time that I truly felt what it meant to love yourself, to accept myself for all of my, my great strengths, of which there are so many, and, the even more limitless, issues and challenges that I have. And that was the bedrock moment for me. That was the moment of, I now know something that is possible in this lived experience that I didn't think was possible before, even though that I wanted. And now that I know that, I will have to make a daily commitment, or do my best to be consistent with that daily commitment, to return to this place, because this is going to be my best life if I choose to come from this place.
100%. Gosh, that's a beautiful story, and what kicks off those moments that just kick off the personal growth process. And I think most of the people watching and listening have either had that moment, they're seeking that moment. Really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your experience with us. So beautiful. Where can people find you if they want to talk more, learn more about you?
MassimoBackus.com is my website. MassimoBackus. I'm on LinkedIn. As far as I know, I'm the only Massimo Backus on planet Earth. So it should be easy to find me. And Michelle, I so appreciate you and the work that you're doing, and bringing these types of conversations to the forefront in a way that is not, glamorized, but that it becomes a conversation and that it is normalized. I think that is the work that we're here to do and that we're aligned on. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Bye, everybody.